I was waiting for John. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Engineering and Works Committee meeting for tonight, Monday the 12th of March. Just to let you know, we're recording and webcasting the meeting. This committee meeting is being webcast and recorded. By speaking at the committee meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this committee meeting that you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. AlburyCity accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this committee meeting. An audio recording will be made for administrative purposes. I've received one conflict of interest declaration from Councillor King. The conflict of interest is pecuniary significant, professional relationship with tenderers. It's item EWC 7.2 and his action is to leave the room. So that's noted and I'll sign off on that right now. Thanks. Apologies. We have no apologies. Every committee member's here. Confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I move that the minutes of the Engineering and Works Committee meeting held on Monday the 12th of February at 6:46 p.m. be confirmed. Thank
you. Councillor Mack.
Happy to second that, Mr Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Con, do you wish to speak to that?
No, thank you, Mr Chair.
Okay. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Any matters arising from those minutes? No. Reports and minutes of committee meetings and working parties. Minutes of the Local Traffic Committee meeting held on the 8th of February. Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Happy to move the recommendation that the committee, the minutes of the recommendations of the following committee be received, noted and acceptance. A, the minutes of the Local Traffic Committee meeting held on 8 February 2018.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey, do you wish to speak to those, to that motion?
Thank you, Mr Chair. They're a fine set of minutes.
Fine set of minutes. It's probably a little bit jumping the gun to sort of mention that nothing's happened much with our traffic flows and traffic lights in Albury, seeing that we're having a workshop later on.
I think you might redirect that question to one of the staff members, Mr Chair.
Okay. No, I won't. It was a Dorothy Dixer. Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Officers' reports for consideration. EWC 7.1, provision of council security services, contract number 17/00798. Councillor Mack.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Happy to move that the committee recommends to council that council accepts a tender from Jeff Clark Security Proprietary Limited for the schedule of rates, contract number 17/00798 for the provision of security services for AlburyCity facilities for a 3-year period commencing 1 May 2018 for the estimated contract value of 461,073.60, including GST. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mack, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thanks, Mr Chair.
Any other comments? Anybody who wish to speak to it? Your light's still on, Councillor Doxey? Okay. If there's no questions or any comments, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Item EWC 7.2, I'll wait for Councillor King to leave the chamber. You know, that's right. Bit of a shame about the workshop. I could have had that meeting going for quite some time. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, so Councillor Doxey,
Thank you, Mr Chair. I move the recommendation that the committee recommends to council that council accepts a tender from XL Gray Bruni Pty Limited for contract number 17/02125 Kerr Road Reconstruction Stage 4 in the lump sum amount of $1,201,963.40, including GST.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Happy to second that, Mr Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey, I've got a question first from Councillor Thurley.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr Chair. Councillor Con, we received an email or a message earlier today from a local person suggesting that a possibility could be to install an underpass in a particular part of that road reconstruction. And I guess my question would be directed to Mr Ferris. Is that possible, and could it be done, for example, by delegating authority to council to negotiate a change in the contract to do that if it were seen as advisable and feasible?
Okay. Yeah, I just want to clarify from Councillor Thurley, for what purpose would that underpass be?
To provide access from both sides of the road without having to cross the road.
For pedestrians or animals?
Pedestrians.
Okay,
only.
No worries. It's not unusual for underpasses to be done for natural
I'd
habitat.
dispute that. There are numerous in our city, Union
right.
Road and others.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Animals, okay.
Kangaroos.
I usually kill the kangaroos. They don't go under the road. Mr Ferris.
Through you, Mr Chair. Certainly we can look at the provision of an underpass, albeit the Kerr Road's been designed to link up with our existing bike paths. Primarily development on the western side in stage 4 is private property that cannot be developed. It's environmental lands. So the demand to cross over there would, in my view, would be limited. However, happy to review if it's possible to include it. The current plan also has, where the subdivisions on the west-hand side are, there's provisions with pathways and then an at-grade pedestrian refuge, where there's clear sight distance both ways, and crossing of Kerr Road can be done safely. So the pedestrian demand there may not warrant the investment for an underpass. Underpasses do work in a number of areas in our city. Typically, it's where there's a larger change in grade from Emery Kerr Road in the area discussed. Doesn't have a significant change in grade, therefore any underpass may have the road at an extremely high level, but we'd need to do a feasibility assessment on that, and happy to take that on notice and get back to council with the ability to provide that.
Would you have with all your experience in road building, etc., would you have a ballpark figure of what an underpass might cost? I mean, I'm not going to hold you to it, but like, what, 300 plus or minus 20% or something?
Through you, Mr Chair, I'd hate to try and put a ballpark figure on it. We don't know how wide it needs to be, what are the services either side of the road, how deep they are, if it can be accommodated without much change to the finish level versus a substantial amount of fill. If it is cut into the natural surface, how we drain that, how we get power to it for lighting, all of those things would need to be considered as part of a feasibility study. As I say, the contract is extensive in scope, and the contractor will be there for an extended period, so we will have an opportunity to do a high-level check to see if it's feasible. If it is, we can certainly have some discussions with the contractor as potentially a variation to the contract.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor, I've got 3 questions. Councillor Mack?
Thank you, Mr Chair. Just in relation to that particular proposition, is it my understanding from what Mr Ferris has said, and Mr Ferris might want to reconfirm this, that there is no benefit for pedestrians or cyclists to cross the road at that juncture because it is a natural tree preserved area. It's a preservation that goes all the way to Thurgoona Drive, and any traffic would be remaining on the eastern side of the road. So in terms of a $300,000 expenditure item, or whatever it might cost, I think it's a significant waste of resources at this point. And if we're debating this issue, should we not have an amendment on this particular item? Because at this point, I'm of the view that personally that we're not going to gain anything. And if anyone wants to put up an amendment on the recommendation, more than happy to debate it. But at this point, Mr Ferris or whoever wants to answer that question, can they answer that question so we can clarify whether there is a need for this particular overpass? Because it sounds like it's the road to nowhere at this point.
Mr Ferris?
Through you, Mr Chair. The area on the western side of Kerr Road from Pickworth through to Thurgoona Drive is privately owned. It's environmentally sensitive area that cannot be developed. So if a crossing was in that region, there would be no development adjacent to that crossing. Where it could be used as the development further to the south, we would have to construct a pathway up to the crossing. At the moment, the intent is to have an at-grade where there's ample sight distance to cross actually across the road and join the bike path on the eastern side of Kerr Road that'll run the full length, connect up with the Thurgoona Park bike path, and longer term we'll take the southern end and connect it up to the bike path at Tabletop Road.
Oh. So to answer your question, Councillor Mack? Thank you. Councillor Doxey, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr Chair. I agree with Councillor Mack. My question is to Mr Ferris, just continuing on with the discussion. Kerr Road is feeding a number of subdivisions, both large and small. Would this, for example, if we made any changes, slow down the project for the big picture? Thank you.
Mr Ferris?
Through you, Mr Chair. Certainly if we bring a change in design element at this stage of the process, then that will extend the contract. So stage 4 is funded in this year's budget. Certainly it may not complete it by the 30th of June, but predominantly a large portion of it will be expended as per Council's budget process or forecast. To bring another element in, and as I suggested, there's a whole number of aspects we'd need to consider. It may be straightforward or it may be a fairly complex consideration, but we'd need to take that on notice and check the feasibility of that.
Councillor Glacken, you don't have a question anymore?
I sort of did. I think it's been clarified that we would, one, look at whether or not there was a need for it, and then look at feasibility, and then look at the possibility of varying the contract. So I'm pretty comfortable that we've had those answers already. Okay. So thank you, Mr Chair.
Councillor Thurley, you had a question?
Look, it was just a question that was raised. I'd be very happy if Mr Ferris came back with the back of the envelope. I don't want a feasibility study. There was just some question raised about this being useful or cost effective. It sounds to me right now that it isn't, but I'm happy to accept a back of the envelope calculation.
Thank you. If there's no further comments or questions, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Can we get Councillor King back in the room, please? Oh, there's nothing else on the agenda, so I'm not sure whether he needs to be here for that. He does, okay.
He might have an urgent matter.
Oh, he might have an urgent matter, yes. Yeah, told you. And I was just going to blank out everybody else. Just note that Councillor King's returned to the chamber at 6:15. We've got no officers' reports for noting, no delegates' reports for noting, no notice of urgent business unless you have any, Councillor King. I do not. Okay. No confidential matters, so I declare the meeting closed at 6:16 p.m.
There it is. Looking for that.